Story 1. Irukandji jellyfish grow only to about 1 cubic centimeter in size but have an incredibly painful sting. One symptom of the sting is a strong, impending sense of doom. Victims have begged their doctor to be killed, as they were certain they would die anyway. Story 2. A company called Warner Chappell Music collected licensing fees for use of the song Happy Birthday to You, all the way until 2015. That's why characters in movies often sing other songs like For He's a Jolly Good Fellow, and restaurant chains often have their own birthday songs they sing to customers. Story 3. Battleships in museums on display that are from World War II and later cannot start their engines because they have preservative grease inside, in case the Navy has to bring the ship back into service. Story 4. Your immune system has at least one cell to combat every single infection that could ever exist. Your T cells are cells that, when created, go through a sort of training phase in the thymus where they are allowed to change their genetic code at random in order to be able to battle one random very specific disease. During this, the body also kills any T cells that are accidentally adapted to kill human cells. Then the T cells are sent to lymph nodes to be found later by presenting an antigen, a part of a pathogen, to it. Basically, you have something for everything in your body. The problem is just finding it, as it takes a good few days for your body to locate the specific one. Story 5. An 18-inch pizza is more than two 12-inch pizzas. To do the math, the surface area of a circle is pi times radius squared. Pi is the constant. An 18-inch pizza has a 9-inch radius. A 12-inch pizza has a 6-inch radius. 9 squared is 81. 6 squared is 36. 36 times 2 is 72. 81 is greater than 72. Story 6. When a body is to be cremated, the funeral director will first ensure that any rubber-soled shoes, watches, phones, glasses, and sealed glass or metal containers are removed. Any sealed container becomes a pressure vessel when exposed to temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. These will explode and do significant damage to the crematorium. This is the same reason why any electrical devices or items with batteries are removed, including most watches and pacemakers. When an undertaker asks whether your loved one had any medical implants or pacemakers, this is the reason why. Glasses often tend to leave a silica residue on the bottom of the cremator, which is awkward to clean up and can build up over time. Rubber sols are incredibly polluting and are often not caught by the filtration systems. This usually results in a black plume of smoke coming from the chimneys. Also, all metal residues and materials collected after the cremation is completed are gathered up and can either be returned to the family, upon request, or treated and recycled, with proceeds from the recycling going towards a worthy charity. Story 7. If you get a tooth abscess on the maxillary, top arch, canine to canine, it needs to be taken care of as soon as possible. The area is called the triangle of death when it comes to abscess or infections. Source: dental hygienist. Story 8. Font describes the variation in style in which something is written. Size: italic, bold, all caps, etc. Typeface is the variation in the style of letters, Arial times New Roman Comic Sans, that most people refer to as fonts. Story 9. Centralia, Pennsylvania, is a ghost town in Pennsylvania. Somehow, they managed to set a coal mine on fire, and it has been burning since 1962. There are still a few people living there, apparently, but there are noxious fumes venting out of the ground, so the government does not allow new people to go there. Story 10. Not only can you take the square root of a negative number, but mathematics breaks down eventually if you can't. For everyday use, you won't ever need to actually know that, but quite a few things are only able to be represented by a number system that includes negative square roots. This is why complex numbers exist. The human brain is far better at rationalizing emotional decisions after the fact than it is at coming up with rational decisions. Story 11. People don't really care that much about you. You worry about how they perceive you? Well, they worry about how you perceive them. Also, even if you make a mistake, at worst you'll be a story in someone's storybook for a while. That guy who, and it won't even affect your life. And you'll always be some story for someone. Good, bad, neutral, both. It can't be prevented. Embrace it and go with it, rather than fighting it. If people want to hurt you, It stops working once you don't allow yourself to be hurt. All easier said than done, though. I know. I know from experience. Story 12. Abraham Lincoln's assassination was not just supposed to be an assassination, but a legitimate coup attempt that could have restarted the Civil War. 3 other people were supposed to die that night. Story 13. The human body has no means of sensing wetness and thus doesn't know what wetness is. It can only sense temperature and pressure. Put on a latex glove and submerge your hand in water, and it will feel wet. The movie The Fifth Element is the only movie to reach general audiences in which the protagonist and antagonist are never made aware of one another, let alone meet on screen. Domestic cats have what's known as a non-fatal terminal velocity. This means that, provided they are of healthy age and weight, you could punt one out of a 747 at cruising altitude, and it would hit the earth with no measurable damage. To temporarily reduce or remove entirely the symptoms of tinnitus, cover your ears with your palms as hard as you can, and ensure your middle fingers are touching behind your head. Then rapidly tap the entire length of your fingers against the base of your skull. You may own your phone, as in the piece of hardware in your hand, but you own exactly none of the things it can do. Remember that when texting, taking pictures, posting online, or anything else you do. Story 14. Pain is a perception of the brain that is trying to make sense of biological, social, and psychological variables. You do have nerves that carry nociceptive information that may indicate harm to an area of the body, but it is up to your brain to decide if you are going to sense pain somewhere. Story 15. Your eyes have a separate immune system from the rest of your body. If they get damaged in such a way that it affects anything other than your eyes, your regular immune system can attack the damage and will not recognize them, meaning your own body can permanently blind you. What's worse, your body cannot tell the difference between either eye. If one of them gets infected or damaged, your immune system can attack your healthy eye and take away your sight entirely. Story 16. There is an enzyme in aloe vera that breaks up calcium kidney stones. If you get these stones, taking a little aloe vera each day can help you to not get them in the long run. Story 17. In 1843, a man in China declared himself to be the younger brother of Jesus and the second son of God. Long story short, due to religious conflicts and the historical context of China, approximately 25 million people died. Story 18. Water does not conduct electricity. Edit because I should probably explain. Pure water does not conduct electricity. Getting water to that level of purity is relatively costly, however. Story 19. If you ever get dengue fever, remember that your platelet count drops for 6 or 7 consecutive days with or without any treatment, and then it gradually rises. The only treatment for dengue is lots and lots of fluids and rest. Story 20. If you have a dental phobia, you can find a dentist that offers medical sedation such as pills to help you get through the dentist visit. The dentist is incredibly important for heart health, so do not let anything stop you. Story 21. The only way for squirrels to die by falling is to starve as they fall, as they can escape terminal velocity. Simply put, they cannot take falling damage. Story 22. You have a turn indicator in your vehicle to alert others of your lane switching intentions. You are not only allowed but strongly encouraged or required to use the indicator a few seconds before initiating lane changes and turns. Story 23. Ever felt drowsy and fatigued after having a meal? Postprandial somnolence is the cause, set in motion by the parasympathetic nervous system, better known as a food coma. I don't know why, but I really like this little fact. And the word parasympathetic. And my cat. Story 24. When George Bush Sr. ran for president in 1980, one of his biggest backers was a Texas oil man who had known and supported Bush for a long time. Bush was a former Central Intelligence Agency director and previously had ties to the Central Intelligence Agency before becoming director, despite false public claims he was an outsider, including during congressional hearings on the infamous MKUltra Central Intelligence Agency program that used various techniques including brainwashing to try to create assassins, among other things. Anyway, he and the Texas oil man's families had ties, and the businessman supported Bush for president. But of course, Reagan won the nomination instead, with Bush as vice president. So Reagan and Bush moved into the White House, and meanwhile Bush's family remained friends with the oil man and his family, including Bush's sons and the oilman's sons hanging out together and having a meeting right around the time one of the oilman's sons, named John Hinckley Jr., decided to get a gun and shoot President Reagan. Yes, the oilman was Hinckley's father. The Bushes had strong ties to the Hinckley family, and in a side coincidence, John Hinckley Jr. had ties to World Vision, which is partly funded by the Central Intelligence Agency-connected United States Agency for International Development, and which is also where Mark David Chapman worked before he assassinated John Lennon 3 months before Hinckley shot President Reagan. It's also odd that Hinckley wrote notes while incarcerated and those notes were taken from his cell and never made public, along with other documents that remain unreleased by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and included written claims that he was part of a conspiracy to kill Reagan. Now, it's important to remember that Hinckley had a history of erratic behavior and mental health issues that seemed to have manifested in his late teens and grew worse over the next several years, and his long history of stalking Jodie Foster and making multiple plans to commit murders. He initially targeted President Carter but was actually stopped and caught with weapons and handcuffs, so his plans to kill Carter fell through and he wound up targeting Reagan instead. But it's also true that MKUltra and related Central Intelligence Agency programs often intentionally used vulnerable people, including mentally ill and emotionally disturbed young people, in their tests and efforts. So there's plenty of general evidence that Hinckley was just a mentally ill man who got a crazy idea and tried to commit murder. But it's also undeniable that there are some pretty crazy coincidences and connections. And the Bush family not only tried to dodge questions and initially deny knowing anything about it, they literally fabricated a story to lie and claim the two families only had a recent vague connection through someone else at a party. So their reactions and lies coupled with the actual ties between the families, between Bush and the Central Intelligence Agency during a particularly relevant period, and other elements like the federal law enforcement's refusal to release all of the information, and the mysterious loss of Hinckley's jailhouse notes and the proximity to previous assassin Chapman still raise a lot of eyebrows. Well, actually, it does not raise eyebrows in the mainstream press, though, because there was quickly a media blackout instituted on all of this information after a couple of days of questions, and to this day there's no satisfactory investigation of the links, no release of documents still hidden from the public, and no media willing to report on any of this. So yeah, a rich father who supported a former Central Intelligence Agency director for president had a son who, when the former Central Intelligence Agency director lost the presidential nomination to a guy the rich father disliked, the rich guy's son tried to murder the guy his father didn't like, which would have made the father's friend and former Central Intelligence Agency director rise to president. Story 25. A pygmy shrew's heart beats 1,200 times per minute. They live 13 months on average. A blue whale's heartbeats can be as slow as 4 per minute, with an average lifespan of 90 years. Story 26. Income taxes are tiered. Each tier of income is taxed at a progressively higher rate. You pay the lowest tax rate on the lowest tier of income, a slightly higher rate on the next higher tier, and so on. The higher your taxable income, the higher your tax rate, but the highest rate applies only to the highest tier of income that you reach. It is crazy the number of people who do not understand this. There are other taxes as well, like use taxes on non-essential items, and the lottery is a tax on people who are bad at math. Story 27. To become a butterfly, a caterpillar first digests itself. But certain groups of cells survive, turning the soup into eyes, wings, antennae, and other adult structures. Do you want to know more? Story 28. The way we feel time is closely related to how our attention is wired. If our mind is awake and attentive enough to the present moment, the flow of time will become nonlinear. Story 29. Humans constantly project onto others their own mindset. So whatever you think and feel about others is typically how you perceive yourself. Additionally, many, if not most people, struggle with self-awareness. Story 30. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer book was created as a promotional piece for the retailer Montgomery Ward. Years later, the creator of it asked for the rights to the storyline, and Montgomery Ward agreed since they didn't see any value in it. Now it's a Christmas classic and movie franchise. Story 31. The colors, sounds, taste, and touch sensations you experience are all not physical or intrinsic to the physical world. There is no blue or orange in the physical world of electrons and protons. It's all inside the virtual game engine that your brain constructs. You are not a person. You are a what if all the cells came together and acted as if it was a person. Story 32. The United States warned Japan prior to each atomic bomb dropping, saying, "Hey, quit now or it will be bad." After the first bomb dropped, they basically said, "See, we told you. Now knock it off or we will do it again." Story 33. How to read. I say this based on the thousands of customers I've served over the years. I cannot tell you how many people get stuck on basic words printed on products, signage, or screens.